For the final weeks of this semester, we're going to be focusing on WebQuest and how they can be used and how they can be integrated into the curriculum to enhance teaching and learning, and also how you can integrate multiple tools that we've used throughout the semester to help your students work in small groups to address your essential questions. I'm going to use this PowerPoint slide and make some changes to it, but I wanted to give credit where credit is due, so I left the original authors' names on the title slide. But we're going to really explore the inquiry teaching model of WebQuest and see how you can use that in your particular curriculum. Assuming this is not your first education course, I know you're very familiar with John Dewey and the inquiry-based education. And so I won't elaborate much on this, but this is the father of the inquiry-based model. So as you can see, WebQuest, the essence of WebQuest in and of itself isn't a new idea, but it's something that derived from Sir John Dewey, as I like to call him. So when you're making your WebQuest, really what you are doing is addressing these four primary interests of the child. And as you go through the process and you learn more about WebQuest, you really see that you're going to actually hit on all of those key elements. And one of them in particular, the gifts of artistic expression, that can really be done with a lot of the different tools that we've been using this semester, and some of the other ones that you may be more familiar with that you're more than welcome to integrate into this particular project. So based on Sir Dewey's model for inquiry, we're really focusing here on allowing the students to ask questions, investigate, create, discuss, and reflect. And it's an iterative process. And this is something that you need to make sure you allow your students to experience when they're going through your WebQuest that you create. So make sure that initially you are going to ask a question, but make sure that they can ask a question within the framework of the WebQuest that you are creating, so they'll be able to go through this inquiry process. To dive in more into this inquiry process, when we're asking, we're focusing on the issue, and then you'll see when we go through this WebQuest model where that fits. The investigation adds to insight through the progressive questioning that you're going to have your students do in the small groups. Create, shape significant new thoughts and theories. And so especially for your older students, you're really going to allow them to create more. And this is something that your kindergarten, I don't want those of you who teach in the lower level grades to feel like this is something that your students can't do. Kindergarten students can create and investigate and discuss, and they can also reflect. So make sure that you include all of these different elements in your WebQuest. Now, some of the assumptions about the model are that the questions arrive out of experience and one question will lead to the other. And when we're talking about using technology or using technology to enhance learning, a lot of the activities should be engaging and hands-on. And hands-on could be multiple different things. So you could have a hands-on experience where the students are reflecting and using blogs, or they're actually going out and using digital cameras, or all different types of things that can be used when you're talking about the different types of activities where students are creating. And then when we're talking about collaborating, there's so many tools that we've used this semester that can be integrated within your WebQuest as well. As part of your WebQuest, in the teacher resources area, you are also going to create a lesson plan, and you're going to use either the DID or the Assure model, whichever is your preference, and feel free to customize that and modify that a little bit to better suit your needs. And if there's something that your particular school or district uses, feel free to use. You can customize it, but I should still recognize that the essence of it is Assure, or the essence of it is the DID model. And when you're going through that process, make sure you're addressing the questions that are on this particular slide. One of the most important elements of your WebQuest is the questions that you do ask. So make sure that if it's an inference or an interpretive question, that you really ask really good questions for the task, so students know up front what it is they're supposed to address. And in your process, it's clear on how that those steps that they're going to go through is going to help them address the questions that you pose. And here are some additional questions that you need to take into account when you're in the creative process of determining what it is your WebQuest is going to cover. And the metacognitive process is very, very important, and this is something that will really help your students prepare even for the Common Core state standards that are coming up. The reflection and the reflective process is very important, and it's something that I try to include on all of your assignments so you can actually take the time to actually think about your thinking, and it's a big component of this final project here. I know I've used the term WebQuest probably since the first slide of this particular assignment, and all the slides leading up to this one we're giving you the theoretical foundation of what a WebQuest is. And really what it is a process or kind of like a lesson where your students will go through, and embedded in that particular lesson or assignment or activity are different opportunities for students to apply critical thinking, inquiry, problem solving, high order thinking type of skills to address some type of problem, scenario that you pose to your students, and then they work in small groups. It could be a pair, 3 students, 4 students, really no more than 5 students per group, and each one of those students has a specific role. And as they work together and they collaborate, and especially in this particular class, there's collaboration tools that you can have them use to work together. If it's Google Docs, they can use forms, they could use blogs and wikis, all types of different tools that students can use in the WebQuest that you create to collaborate, and then also to present their findings to the class or to the world, depending on what it is that you want your students to do. There's tons of resources available in this week's folder, so feel free to explore them and search for examples that are more applicable for your field. WebQuest can be used again in K-12 and even outside of the typical classroom. So feel free to explore, and if you need help, do not hesitate to ask me early in the process on how we can help draft a WebQuest that will help you address your essential question. So when you're creating your WebQuest, you'll notice that it has, in essence, 5 major steps. You have your introduction, your task, the process, the evaluation, and your conclusion. In addition to those, I'm going to have you create an actual welcome page, and then you're also going to create a teacher page, and that's something that is, when you search your WebQuest, you'll see that the teacher page is included in all WebQuests, and so that is where you're going to put your lesson plan. And so it involves asking questions and students investigating, and they're going to create a solution to the question, and it really should tie in nicely with your essential questions. Feel free to have them reference other assignments that you've created, and they can use different skill sets that you've taught them, be it how to actually conduct more efficient source searches so they can and use the web resources that you provide, but also go out and find other resources that will help them better address the question. And from my brief description of the WebQuest, you can clearly see how the WebQuest really is the inquiry model of teaching, but just using some newer tools. And as we discussed earlier, the different types of questions, when you're creating a WebQuest and the students are actually going through the process of addressing that particular question or those sets of questions, this is the process that they'll be going through to help them solve the particular problem. As you're probably gathering from learning more about WebQuest, they can be very involved. Most of them that I've done in the past have gone on for a couple of days. You can create WebQuests that students can do within a classroom period. For those particular types of WebQuests, you really have to make sure all the resources are there and that the final product is something that is can easily be done in whatever your classroom setting period is. It may be easier for you to create a WebQuest that is more long-term, since I'm having you include so many different resources. So for this particular case, creating a long-term WebQuest would probably be more applicable. In addition to addressing the Common Core standards, we're also going to address our favorite standards, which are the National Educational Technology Standards. So this is a great opportunity for you to reflect back on those particular standards and figure out what standards, teacher and student, that you're going to address with your WebQuest. And these are some additional NET standards that WebQuest allow your students to explore if designed effectively. Prior to the introduction, I actually want you to give a welcome, and you can do that using a podcast, a screencast, or whatever different way you want to welcome your students into the WebQuest. I want you to do that. And then the next page is the introduction. And so on this page, you're really going to engage the student, and you can do that either using a WebQuest or a cartoon, or using Flickr images, using something or some type of technology to really engage the student and get them hooked. And this is where the hook really does come in, is the introduction. So now that you have your students hooked with the introduction, now you're going to pose the initial problem, what students are expected to learn after they complete this particular assignment, and also their specific roles. So that will be something that you would include here in the task. This is the most detailed portion of your WebQuest, the process area. And this is the step-by-step instructions on what the student should be doing, what each role should be doing at a particular time, what resources they're going to be using. Here you would provide them with hyperlinks or URL links to relevant resources. You would have if you have some RSS feeds, whatever information your students need to know how to access and what to do, you put this here, and this could be in a numbered list of what sequence they should be using to complete the task, and then what the final output should be as they go through the process. For your evaluation, you should include a rubric, and I'm requiring you to create that rubric either using Word, creating a table, or you could create some type of table in Excel and copy and paste that into your website. I did provide access to Rubistar, which is a rubric generator, and the only reason why I allowed you to do that is because I think it's a great resource, but in addition to being a great resource, it does allow you to export your created rubric into Excel, and then once it's in Excel, you can, it may put in Word too. I can't remember 100%. I'm not 100% sure about that. But once it's in Excel and or Word, you can then modify it even further and customize it more. That's what I typically do. I'll create a rubric in Rubistar and choose bits and pieces from different ones, and then kind of copy and paste and cut and paste and draft my own rubric, and even change some of the language and points. So that may be helpful. And you may also want to include a self-assessment for students, especially since they're going to be working in groups. And you may want to have a rubric per role, so students will have something that they could use to evaluate themselves to make sure they're pulling their own weight, and it's also something for their fellow classmates to use to hold them accountable for their particular role in helping the group create the final product. Now for your conclusion, you're really just congratulating the students for accomplishing the goal and for completing the task and solving the problem. So this is a really fun page to create, and then you can also, in addition to congratulating them for completing it, also pose some reflective questions here for them to help with their metacognitive process. As mentioned earlier, there's a folder within this week's folder called WebQuest Resources, where there's tons of information that's available. In addition to this particular lecture, there's a Prezi presentation that also has some additional resources and will hopefully help you wrap your brain around the WebQuest and help you create a WebQuest that addresses your EQs and effectively integrates educational technology to enhance student learning. I really look forward to seeing what you create for your WebQuest and how you tie everything in together. Happy WebQuesting!